All right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll jump right into our presentation. We'll start by just going through introductions of who we have here at the tables. Mr. Clapp, if you hit the next slide, there are photos that go with, as we are far away. It might help to see our faces on the screen. So, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm Tom Clapp, Director of Personalized Learning. I've been in this district for longer than anybody else at this table, for sure. I think this is year 15 now. Started out in secondary science. So I have really my foundation in that, and now I'm 2 years into this position.
And I'm Nick Wright. I'm in my first year at Northern Cass, but ninth year teaching social studies. And yeah.
My name is Hilary Anderson. I'm also a ninth year educator, first year Jaguar. I started out teaching level 3, all subjects, and then moved into level 3 ELA.
And I'm Jessica Stone. I'm our personalized learning coach at Northern Cass. This is my second year in this position, and prior to this, I spent 8 years in second grade.
Corey Steiner, Superintendent, Northern Cass, and this is my 7th year in that position.
Good afternoon, Sam Johnson, third year educator and third year Jaguar, 7 through 12 math.
Yeah. All right, so we'll share a little bit more about just who we are so you get an idea. As you heard in the video, one of our educators mentioned we're in the middle of a cornfield. She wasn't exaggerating about that. We are located about 25 miles northwest of Fargo, North Dakota. Our district is made up of many small communities, and we also have many that open enroll. Our enrollment, we are a pre-K through 12 district. We are in one building, and we have about 660 learners. And then we also, we follow the Marzano instructional framework, and we are high reliability schools certified in levels 1 through 4.
We're not a district that believes necessarily in a vision or mission statement. So we actually developed a why statement based off of Simon Sinek's work. And this is really what led us to where we're at today. Is we tried to define world class, and we realized that in the current system and structures we had in place 4 years ago, world class wasn't something that could be achieved. We truly believe that every learner can change the world, and therefore that means we have to do things differently. We have to think differently. We know more about learning than ever before in the history of our country. And with that comes the requirement or the responsibility to do more. So this why is what drives everything that goes on in our school district.
This is a little bit of a new development for us, something that in hindsight we should have done from the very beginning. But this year, myself, Mrs. Stone, Dr. Steiner, the rest of the personalized learning team here at Northern Cass, we developed our pillars of personalized learning. These are the 8 really foundational pieces that we hold true to. We believe it provides clarity, not only for our educators that are, boots on the ground doing the work, but it also provides clarity for how we go about making decisions, how we go about trying to figure out exactly what it is to mean world class. So we divided up personalized learning into social emotional learning, proficiency-based. So we are a proficiency-based school. We hold kids to proficiency before they can move on, or at least try to. We're still a work in progress. We're getting there. Flexible curriculum assessment is something that over the course of 3 years has drastically changed mindsets in our building. We have come a long ways from an understanding of how we assess kids and what it means to assess kids. Standards-based, and don't get standards-based and proficiency too confused. We do grade based on the standards, but in a standards-based system, kids can move on even if they don't get there. So we are looking at the standards, but we're also holding them to proficiency. So those are 2 separate pillars, although they're very linked, as all of these are. Agency, and you'll notice we didn't put learner agency on there. We put agency because we believe in agency not only for our kids, but for our adults as well. We're all learning. And then the last one, of course, perhaps the greatest, the biggest, is equity. We want equity for all kids. Just want to add anything?
Yeah, I would add one that you saw, Tom said 8, he meant 7, so we'll say that part in there. So nobody's looking for the other one. The other part I'll explain in there a little bit is the proficiency piece. It's really important to understand one of the tenets of our proficiency-based system is we no longer have percentage grades in our district nor letter grades. So we are full standards-based and 4-3-2-1 in our district. And that was a gigantic lift, which involved a lot of mileage on the road with Mr. Clapp and I meeting with colleges, legislators, university officials, and our Department of Public Instruction representatives. So there's much depth to these, but that's one of the key things that people ask is that we don't believe you can really truly personalize and make it about learning unless you get away from the grades.
Yeah, I said 8 because at one time we had 8. We narrowed it to 7. So when we say that we're never finished the work, this is what we mean. These things are always being constantly revised. The next layer to this, and we call a lot of these things an onion, because every time you do something, you uncover more layers underneath it. So the next layer of this is what we call our principles, and these are connected, but let's call them a little bit more specific. We're not going to go through all of these in detail. Hopefully these types of things will come up in the Q&A session here in a few minutes. But it gives clarity to educators, it gives clarity to parents, it gives clarity to our administration and leadership teams of exactly how are we going to do this, and what does it look like, and what are we going to hold true, and really just guide the work. So the principles are kind of the layer underneath the pillars, if you want to put it that way. Good? Yeah. At this point, we're going to really just open the floor up as a Q&A session. We're hoping the video, which was really well done. I don't know who put all that together, but man, it was fantastic.
Their crew did, the Evolving Education. That was great.
Yeah. We're hoping that inspired some good questions, and we'll take questions either by coming off mute, or I'll be monitoring the chat as well. So if you want to throw your questions in chat, and the team sitting here will just answer what we can.
I think there's one in there, Tom, in the chat.
Youth ones. So how have the conversations with legislators and colleges gone? What has been the reaction of colleges?
Yeah, that was a really interesting thing. So we did 2 sets. We did one 2 years ago where we went to our research universities, some of our fine arts universities, private universities, a few in Minnesota. And when we did that, to be honest, it was really well received. And part of that was because we explained to them, we actually were going to send learners to them who we could guarantee what they do and do not know. They also explained to us that, many said, well, if you don't have a percentage grade, they can't accept you into a college. And they said, they get transcripts from around the world in different languages, and they accept them into their universities. They're going to accept somebody from 25 miles away. So the colleges were very supportive of us making this change. One of the things we found this year is we went around with an idea of a mastery transcript, getting away from a state required transcript, is that we still have some bumps in terms of some numbers they need to see with GPA and potentially some assessment scores, but they're very open to the idea. Next year, we'll be piloting a totally non-grade based transcript with about 4 of our universities, and they're receptive because they know change is coming, especially since the ACT has become test optional throughout the country. Our universities know that they're going to have to adjust, and they've been fabulous to work with so far.
Secondary question that Loretta had was, what was the reaction of parents?
I can let
I can start that one.
Go ahead.
Okay. So conferences looked a little bit different as a first-year educator 3 years ago when we were kind of trying these things. Drilled with what does it look like as a first-year teacher? It was really hard, but I think in the scheme of just 3 years and more a matter of 2 maybe, those questions are almost irrelevant now in just the terms of the progression that we've made and parents understanding from asking those questions, sharing with each other, their kids knowing more about it so they can ask their kids at home. And so it's really gotten to a point of what does it look like to what does my kid have to do to get there? And that's been a huge change that I've seen in the classroom for secondary parents wondering more about personalized learning.
It's also interesting, that reminds me of some of our learners' conversations with it too, but backing up to those couple years ago, Mr. Clapp and myself at those parent-teacher conferences held informational forums for parents to attend so we could communicate to them directly on what proficiency-based grading was and what it meant and how it's different. And then another thing, our learners, like, when they understand it and they can explain it to the parents, it's made the parents much more on board. Like, our kids can communicate to their parents what they know, what they don't know, where their goals are, how they're trying to get to a 3. And so I think just how much more knowledgeable our kids have become with it has impacted our parents' level of comfort with it.
The other thing I'll add is if you're going to start doing this work, develop thick skin. Because and I'll be honest, it was brutal the first 6 months. Because you heard everything from my kid won't get into college, they won't get scholarships, the system worked for me, they're not going to be able to get jobs. And so we had to go through many different layers of conversations with stakeholders and with community members just to get them to a point to understand that actually we were doing this for their kids, not for the system. But it was tough to start with.
Yeah, and very few of the comments with parents had anything to do with learning and what they're doing. It was really just a grading thing. You know, they didn't understand, my kid doesn't get an A, a B, or C, or D, or whatever. It was just a really lack of understanding. And once people started to understand it, we had the first group of kids go through and get accepted to colleges. It really just went away.
I think it's also important to note that changing from traditional grading to proficiency-based is completely separate. I think sometimes there's a mindset of like, oh, a 4 is an A and a 3 is a B, and they don't mesh together. They are completely separate things. And it was also communicating that to parents because they had the understanding that, oh, we just changed to numbers, but they represent the same thing when they don't. They're completely different measures of learning.
Next question in the chat, Kristen asked, how did you get educator buy-in? So maybe looking at our new people.
I'm ready to whip my mask off. This is my, like I said, this is my 9th year in my 4th district. And as a new educator here, it has been the most difficult godsend I have ever done in my career in education thus far. I wholeheartedly believe in it now. I've always wanted to personalize for my kids, but when you see it as a whole system, I'll just give an example, and this might answer other questions, but in an elementary setting, our level 3 is separated into basically 4 groups. So we have kids separated out in who needs who has reading needs. So we have 4 different classrooms for them, and then we have 2 different rooms for them. And then we have 2 different math rooms and science rooms. And we separated the kids out by who's high in math, who has the most need in math, who is most proficient in reading, who needs the most help in reading, and they do a walk-to model. And so in the morning, I have the kids with the most need in reading, and I see 8 kids. And then in the afternoon, I have kids with the who are most proficient in reading, and I have 18 kids. And we're able to work on so many different things. We're able to go through different standards. And I mean, and we work at that pace. So my morning group is much more phonics heavy. And my afternoon group focuses on different things, and they get to proficiency faster. But just seeing the kids and them coming up to you and be like, what did I get on my homophones pretest? Or moving through this playlist, what else can I do? And just super, super powerful.
And those groups aren't a sentence. That's
Right.
important to understand.
Yes,
Those
we
groups
move
are
them a
looked at
lot.
about every 2 to 3 weeks, and kids are regrouped based on the priority standard. So this isn't
Yes, that's a good
reading
point.
groups like when I was in school and you were the kaleidoscope group and you stayed there all year. They're regrouped based on educator data. So Nick, do you want to share?
Yeah, I mean,
We'll go, Sam.
for me personally, well, coming out to Northern Cass, that was the big draw, was the idea of trying to be part of something that's trying to do things a little bit different. After 8 years, I could kind of feel the need for some change in how we did education, especially with the grading system. So I think for my first year experience, kind of feeling freed up a little bit with proficiency scoring, especially in a subject area like social studies, where there are so many pathways that learners could go with discussing different topics, exploring different topics, and then also being able to pace it with where the learners are at has really led to some very deep discussions in the social studies room that I don't think would have been there without some of those more unique elements of being able to get away from, oh, here's a big multiple choice test or something along those lines. So,
I think buy-in's kind of an overused word, if I'm honest. I think it's more about flexibility and letting educators do what they want and not feel shamed for it, I guess. And so I think we've done a better job of understanding how important that is. And then it really only takes like one success story from something that you stepped out of your comfort zone doing to realize how effective and important this work really is. And so that's kind of where I guess my buy-in came from, is the flexibility and seeing that success.
And the last thing I'll say, and I'll let us get to another question, is the advice I'd give to any leader out there is buy-in indicates you can take a vote. And once you have enough buy-in, you move forward. And that's not how education works. Commitment is absolutely what you need. Can you commit to doing what's right for learners? And how do you do that? You get that commitment through being flexible and trusting that the people sitting at this table can do the job better than the person that's at the head of the table in the district. They're in the classrooms. I let them do what they need to do. And when they ask for things, I say yes. That's one of the things. You have to have a culture of yes in this gig.
I think there's a natural lead into the next question here. So as far as educator buy-in, I think part of what Sam mentioned about stepping out of your comfort zone, being encouraged to do so, but then also having a support system of people around you that can help you through that. I can't tell you how many times Mr. Wright and I have been deep in conversations, which is absolutely fine as part of the process. So the next question, I think, lends itself well to that is, how does your district honor teacher or educator agency? So what are some of the things that we do to honor the agency with our adults? And we can talk a little bit about what we have planned for next year, as well as what we currently do.
I think I would respond. One thing at the beginning of our journey, we had kind of laid out a timeline of where we would like to be at certain checkpoints, you know, like about what time should we have our priority standards identified, at what time should we have proficiency scales done. And when we first created it, it was a very hard deadline. And then we recognized that if we are personalizing for our learners, we need to personalize for our educators as well. And so at that point, we recognized that we had educators at different spots. And we came to the conclusion that as long as they were making growth, that is what was expected of them. And then years to follow, we now have instructional coaches and such that can support educators on that journey. But I think that was really one of the beginning pieces of giving our educators some agency.
Yeah, the way that we structure professional learning is also part of that. We've offered different coaching sessions this year where people can sign up for and receive small group instruction with Mrs. Stone and myself. And those come in cycles. We're pretty purposeful about cycling that. And then even the professional development, something that we thought was really successful this year, and we have 3 people that could speak to it if they choose to, would be the school-wide goals. So we pick a little bit of a theme every month and set a little bit of a school-wide goal. We call it a school-wide goal, but we also honor the fact that not everybody's in the same place with that goal. So back in January, we set one about score 4 opportunities for kids, knowing that some people were still building the proficiency scale score 4 opportunities. Some people were ready to try it with kids, and some people were already doing it, ready for what's more, giving more. So when we structured our PD or professional learning around that, it was honoring kind of those 3 groups of people and we gave more individualized support towards that. But we're all collectively as a district moving towards something common.
Educators, do you have other examples how you feel you have agency at Northern Cass?
Well, I'd say the agency is definitely there. You're treated as the professional who is the one that's going to make the ultimate decision on what's going to happen, but you're also not on an island where there's no one you can go to and talk something through. And that's where I found the coaches really useful, but it's not necessarily mandated to you like, oh, this is exactly how you should do it. So there's some kind of free, or I don't know if free is the right word, but just that the feeling of you're the professional to make the decision on what's best for your classroom is pretty engaging.
Good.
Great.
Next one is GPA connected to individual learning standards, performance indicators, or a course as a whole? I think I can answer that pretty quick. We use the LMS called Empower, and really how Empower is set up to allow us to manage the system. The kids do get a final course score, so it's a little bit of all of the above, but their standard scores all accumulate to one overall course score, and that's ultimately what determines their GPA. So some of that would depend on your LMS and how you handle that, but for us, they get a course score, one final course score based on their standards. What are some key steps you took to make the initial shift from a traditional high school schedule to a personalized high school schedule?
So anything you're going to ask about a high school schedule, we're going to tell you we have no idea because we have not figured it out yet. We try to flex mod schedule. We try to schedule with flex, a schedule with resource, a schedule with intervention, a block schedule 2 days a week with a regular schedule. We're trying to figure out what that looks like. We've seen places that have done some things that we like. We don't have a good answer for that. We hope somebody out there does and can help us out. What we're finding is we really just have to use the time differently in the classroom. So the idea of like, oh, we'll do 20 minutes of instruction. It's got to have a more round look like we do with elementary. So we found if we keep waiting for the perfect schedule, we never did anything. So the schedule part, yeah, you can ask it a million different ways. We don't have a magic or a silver bullet for that one.
Yeah, so there's another question that comes down later, so I'll kind of add to it. Our high school schedule is a pretty traditional schedule right now. And I think we jumped the gun when we started with this. We thought schedule would allow us to fix things that we didn't know were problems. So before you go changing the schedule, I think you got to really identify what are some of the problems that are going to happen in the system. And for us, we're still in a mode of how is the schedule going to help us navigate those issues? We got to figure out what those issues are first. So we're allowing more educators the freedom to personalize within their learning centers now, and then maybe next year or 2 years or 3 years down the road, when we really identify what are the big barriers that we can't overcome individually in the individualized learning centers, how do we then adjust the schedule to overcome those? So I think we kind of did it backwards. We started to adjust the schedule before we had any clue why we were adjusting it.
You need to identify the instructional strategies and framework you're going to use and be just relentless at being great at that. Once you're great at that, that can overcome any blips with the schedule. So don't worry about the schedule. That's the last thing. And again, if we don't get there in 2 or 3 years, I'm fine with that because what's happening in the classroom is most important.
Yeah. I think, Stacy, we answered your question about the groups being flexible. So I'm going to jump into Cynthia's question. What fidelity checks for implementation of teacher practice do you use that align with the pillars and principles?
I can share one model that we use. We have instructional rounds at Northern Cass, and they are made up of teams of random educators in levels pre-K through 12. So there are educators on each team from all those various levels, and 2 educators host each month. So the rest of their team gets to watch while they instruct in their class. And then that team has a very structured debrief each month. And they go through a learning cycle process where they're reflecting, they're sharing feedback, celebrating goals. And so really a fidelity check would be, we're holding each other accountable by what we're seeing in our learning centers. And we do have an instructional rounds look fors sheet where Dr. Steiner said, what strategies should we be seeing? Those are listed on that sheet. So our educators know when they're going into learning centers, what they're looking for or what their peers are observing them for.
You want to add anything to that one?
I mean, you have your typical admin observations and evaluations, but I don't know that that is a fidelity check as much as it is a century code check. We've just developed a different instructional framework, and in that framework, we have those monthly things that we're going to focus on. So this month, we're going to get great at coaching sessions. The next month, we're going to get great at collaboration sessions. Those are going to be our fidelity checks, but the rounds are really important. And next year, we're actually going to add in a new aspect to that and bring learners into our rounds with us and actually have them observe with educators. So to see, are our kids seeing the same things our educators are seeing? That's going to be one of our professional learning strategies.
I think there's a couple other elements too that individuals do. So I know Nick does it all the time, where after he gets done with a playlist, we call them playlists here, so a unit of study, let's just call it that, or a standard, he'll survey his kids. He'll survey his learners to figure out what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and he's adjusting what he needs to do based on those surveys. So we see that, and that's kind of common practice around here, not kind of, it's kind of mandatory that they survey their kids. So it's another fidelity check, right? What are our kids saying? What are our kids seeing and saying about what they need, and are we meeting those needs? So
Tom, there was a good question in there about building your proficiency scales rubrics that I think the educators could address.
yeah, so teachers, do you write rubric language for all the levels, 1 through 4 typically, or just the 3? So I think they're asking score.
Yeah.
Score
Yes.
1 through 4 in
Sure.
rubric.
Yeah.
Before I came here, all of the standards in level 3 had 1 through 3. And like Dr. Steiner said, or someone mentioned, that we were working on our school-wide goal of creating score 4s. And I know, so we have PLCs every week, and it's content level related, or in my case, it's grade level related. So our level 3 team meets 3 weeks out of the month when we're not having instructional rounds meetings. And we're able to create those score 4s opportunities for kids. And we can do it in coaching sessions. So since I'm a new educator here, I've been working with Mrs. Stone once a week, and we've had conversations about score 4. I kind of forgot the question.
Yeah. Do you have language for every level? A score
Yes.
1 has something. A
Yes,
score 2
so
has
everything
something.
has something in there. So we look at the score 3 of what's proficient, and we have a Marzano taxonomy that we use. So if a learner at a score 3 needs to explain, then a learner getting a score 4 may need to compare and contrast. And we're working on those. I've told Mrs. Stone multiple times this year, I said, I feel like I'm flying the plane as I'm building it. But it's so important to give those kids those opportunities to have a score 4, and to be able to, I know sometimes it's related just to the standard, but sometimes you can combine different standards and almost make it a pathway in itself. And I don't know what that looks like more in high school, but I know in elementary, it's kind of this different path that the learner chooses to take.
But before Sam and Nick try to answer this one, language, just so we're all clear, in our building, levels refer to, let's call them grade level.
Sure.
We kind of got rid of the term grade level, and we use levels. So when we talk proficiency scale, we call them score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4. So just so we're all speaking the same language, wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, the taxonomy sheet is kind of cool because it's really asking the educator, what do you want the kid to do? Is it just a vocab check? Well, you can just recall or recognize words, or are you having them create something? There's obviously a huge difference of learning between those two verbs, and that's what the Marzano taxonomy really addresses. And so we've tried to adjust our score 1 to the lower level, score 2 kind of in the middle. In the math realm, I know what we're trying to do on our rubrics is show specifically the problems that you need to be able to solve in order to show proficiency. And so, you know, in elementary might just be like classifying triangles and parallelograms. And if you can do that, you're there. And upper level, right, if you can solve these equations, you're at a 3. Otherwise, you should solve simpler equations, more simple ones that maybe you're a 1, 5, or a 2. So we're trying to put in specific examples of what the 3 looks like versus just what is the verb.
I think it's important to note, you heard Mr. Johnson just mention a 1, 5. We also have half points on our proficiency scales. So it's a 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. And if you're going to engage in this work, we'd recommend just adding those 0.5s right away. The value in that is you might have a learner that can do score 2, all of it, and partially score 3. So to have a 2.5, they still can feel and see that they've made growth, that they're almost to that 3. So just, I'd recommend adding those 0.5s right away. Were you gonna say something?
That was actually the point I was gonna make
Okay.
was using the 0.5s, especially with the 4. Because 4, it's supposed to be beyond what you taught in class, but not to the point of doing a whole other assignment at the same time. So that 3.5 is a nice spot to have where the learner has gone in depth on the score 3, but has not necessarily made it to that score 4 level quite yet, but has that option to dive in deep and I want to say be rewarded for that or how you want to word that, but I found that to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a taxonomy, you need to get one.
Yes.
You cannot do anything above a proficient level without a taxonomy. We found that out. The moment we figured out what the taxonomy was and what it's going to look like, it completely changed where we went and our trajectory.
Yeah, I would also share, you know, you can define your proficient really easy because it's essentially copy paste the standard and you might put it in a little bit friendlier language for a kid, but to think about how do you go down, what's the layer below that, what's the layer above that, you need to think about it in terms of the complexity of the verb. You need a taxonomy to do that. I would also share another one of our defining moments where we went, man, we messed that up. And it was our initial understanding of what we wanted our kids to do with score 4 opportunities. Initially, we described all score 4, right? We defined it across the board, across our entire district as learners taking the initiative to create their own score 4 opportunities. And what we discovered really quick was they had no way of knowing how to do that because they had no background knowledge of how to even attempt it. So we had to take a giant step backwards, and our educators had to be the ones to first start defining it, first provide them opportunities. And now we're starting to see a lot more learner generated score 4 things. Kids are now starting to get the hang of how would they take the taxonomy and kind of generate and create their own. But we started there and it went disastrous right away. So don't start there.
Light, that's putting it mildly. The other part too is I want you to understand a score 3 means there's 3 pieces of evidence. That does not mean they did 4 worksheets and they took a test at the end, and if they're proficient on the test, that test doesn't count any more weight than any other assignment. So you have to be very selective in what pieces of evidence you're choosing kids to do. So that end of unit test is the same as that worksheet if that's what you choose to give in the middle of the content. So 3 pieces of evidence is key for us.
And to speak more on that evidence on the elementary side, we worked this spring on making language playlists. So we have 14 priority standards in language in level 3. And so we created playlists, and so they can go into Empower and they can independently learn about something, let's say homophones. So there's a video in there. They have to do a vocabulary piece with that. There is a poster in there for them. And then they have choice boards that we've created that allow them to show, we call them iShows. And so they can pick, am I playing a game with a partner? Am I doing this puzzle? Am I cutting and pasting this? And then like Dr. Steiner said when they get to the end of the playlist, there's an assessment piece. And that can look different too of how they want to show their proficiency with that.
We're gonna jump forward to another question. Loretta, I see you have another question there. I'm gonna put that one next because I think there's a question from Carly in here that I think our educators can speak really well to. And the question is, what have you learned from this year of disruption that you want to wrestle with, change, adapt, moving forward? And I think we can look at disruption from the lens of COVID, or just maybe you're new and now you've learned some stuff. So what have you learned from this year of disruption that you want to change or adapt moving forward?
Something I did this year, just not knowing the future, right? If kids are going to be gone or if they're going to be here, is allowing them to like grab everything at once and just take it. And so they have it. I had a kid specifically who was gone for 3 weeks, came back right on pace, took the assessment to show me that she knew it, and we just moved on. Like there was no hiccup at all of trying to connect, or because they just took it all at once. And so it goes back to that flexibility piece with the kids, but I think it's something that we can continually do for kids that are on vacations. And we do already, but I think there's a next step of the trust that we have to take as educators, that they're actually doing the work the right way. And let's just keep moving forward in whatever instance it could be.
It was tough for our people to be trusting to put their curriculum out there and to have that flexible curriculum, because always we worry our kids are going to cheat. And the answer is yes, they will. But if you make them have multiple pieces of evidence to demonstrate proficiency, they still have to be proficient. And that's ultimately what matters.
Nick, we're all staring at you. I know you're a deep thought.
I can feel it. Well, trying to think. I mean, for me, I don't know if that's necessarily something that I'm going to work on in the future. Maybe I'm already working on it, but taking ideas we've talked about with the taxonomy and just understanding how that can be used to help the learners to generate some of their evidence pieces, incorporating that on the assignment. Like, here is what it means to comprehend, various ways that could be done. Here's how I'm suggested doing it. But if you see a way that you want to demonstrate, and I've had multiple learners do this, hey, can I do this instead? Yeah, you're still at the heart of what I want to get out of this or what I need out of this. That's great. So I think that'd be one piece, is just opening it up to learners in a structured way where here's the straightforward way to do this. But if you see a way to demonstrate proficiency based off of this taxonomy, let's go ahead and do that. Get some interesting results sometimes.
And I think, speaking as a new educator here, looking forward to next year. Right now I teach level 3 ELA, grade 3 ELA, and now I'm switching to 3-4 science next year. And I think the most important things is knowing your priority standards, getting your scales built, and then taking those scales and looking at the activities and things that you want to incorporate, and having the choices of how the kids are going to show that proficiency. It's not necessarily how I would want them to show it, but giving them some autonomy in that too.
The one thing I'll say is, so what we found out this year is that we need a new generation of leaders to take our country to a place that's based on being, gracious with one another, cordial, respectful. We just need to create really good human beings. So from my perspective, it's less about the academic side and more about getting us further into the social emotional side, recognizing that every individual has the right to have bad days, to have great days. They have the right to have an adult who loves them every day. We need to take a step back a little bit and make sure that that's ingrained in our curriculum. We just have to love those guys. And then the other part we need to do is we need to start listening to them. They're voting in elections. They're protesting along adults. They're not getting ready for the real world. They're living in it. And it's about time all of us start to recognize that and let them start to lead this world, whether they're 16 or 18, they can do it. So that's a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think from like a leadership standpoint, so anybody that's on that leadership side, I think we found a little bit of a golden egg this year with the school-wide goals. And it's this idea of individually, all our people have their own individual goals that they're working on and striving towards. But we also have this collective focus every month that keeps the team as a whole moving in the same direction. And we're not maybe all moving at the same rate or the same pace, and we honor that, but it keeps us all moving together. And it really created a bigger sense of team. So we've been at the table now, like, how do we keep that momentum going? And what's the next goal? So we're always trying to think ahead a little bit. The next question from Loretta, this is really a Dr. Steiner question. Per the conversations with legislators, can you talk about the policies at the state level that are supportive of your work and policies that still need to be amended or eliminated?
Yeah, certainly can. And I see Ann Ellison's here, and you know, we have a perfect storm in North Dakota. Ann is a representative from the Department of Public Instruction. We have a superintendent of public schools and a department that is extremely innovative, and we have a governor who came from the business world who will not stand for the status quo. And I don't know if we'll ever get another chance like we're having right now in North Dakota to make the changes we have. Senate Bill 2186 4 years ago allowed us to write waivers that the Department of Public Instruction could get rid of certain code that we felt was problematic. So we wrote a code to get rid of seat time, or a waiver to get rid of seat time. We wrote a waiver to allow 8th graders to take high school credit bearing courses if they're ready. We wrote a credit or a waiver to get credit for work outside the school. This session, we had legislation come through that actually allows proficiency-based scores to count for our state scholarship. Before it was based on an A or B or C. Now it can be a 4, a 3, or a 2. We had legislation, House Bill 1478, that now is building a process, and we just had a meeting the other day to allow kids to articulate credit off school grounds. So if they're in a welding internship, that they could get math and English credit and science credit there. That's a huge one. And then the one that I know Ann and I are really excited about, and actually we're meeting, I think, tomorrow about, is Senate Bill 2196, which actually now will allow the state of North Dakota and individual school districts to develop alternate graduation pathways based on a set of competencies instead of courses. That is a landmark piece of legislation. We're a conservative state, and to be honest, when we testified, we couldn't even tell them what it really looked like because we're not 100% sure, but our legislators trust us. And I think when it was said and done, there were 2 votes in dissent out of everyone. And in our state, that is just not how it works. Those are 4 of the big ones. And I will tell you, every session, we meet every other year in North Dakota, we are always coming with other areas. Seat time is no longer a requirement in our state. It's based on minutes. And we're given a lot of local control over that. Great legislation that you can reach out to me and I can connect you with the people that have been instrumental in that.
That's why we let you take that one, Dr. Steiner. Rattling off all these bills and
Okay.
I don't see any other questions in chat, and we're getting close to time, so we're really good at wait time. So if anybody else has any questions, we can sit here in awkward silence, or you can just take the leap.
Can Northern Cast speak about how it has sometimes, or how it's structured opening its doors? I know COVID threw spins on that, but if people on here were in your neck of the woods or in your fields next by you, how might you open up your doors, or what does that look like if they wanted to get the Northern Cast experience?
I think we let Jess take that because she's really been the one that's made this such a great experience with that and our ambassadors.
So we do offer school visits, and that's really how we became knowledgeable in personalized learning as well. We started visiting other schools around the US. We went to Harrisburg, South Dakota. We visited some schools in Maine. We partner with Lindsay, California. And it's really once your people see it in action, it's much easier for them to take it back and start putting it into action in their own classrooms. So we do offer school visits. Typically we have set days. We are pretty flexible and we can make anything work for you. If you'd like to bring a team, you would just connect with me. And then we actually have our learners. We have a JAG ambassador team. It's made up a group of learners in levels 4 through 12. And so you would be guided on your tour from learners in our building. and you would be able to participate in some Learning Center observations. And then we also offer Q&A panels with educators and learners too.
And it's about a half a day, about 3 hours, and typically has been a really well-received experience that I think we've gotten much better at. And we will be opening our doors to visitors to start the year next year. That's a non-negotiable on our part.
Hi, this is Loretta Goodwin coming off mute. Thanks for all the great information you shared, and especially to Dr. Steiner for that great policy feedback. I'm just curious whether you have advisory periods as part of your setup.
Yes, but not effective advisory periods. Yeah, you know, yes, we have advisory periods built in. It's not been done very well. You know, I think I'll say where we missed it was we didn't engage the learners. We tried to do something to them, and we didn't engage the educators to really collaborate around what it would look like. So we're taking a step back next year. We're trying to develop a true middle school concept where we can build advisory back in. Those that have done it well, it's been a good experience, but those that have struggled with it, it's been a really negative experience. And I don't want to speak for people, but I think that's probably fairly accurate.
Yeah, I think to say it really succinctly would be, you need to have everybody, all your educators, all your kids on the same page. So they know what the expectations during that time are and what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you have just even a few people that aren't on the same page, it'll fall apart pretty quickly. I don't know, Mr. Wright shaking his head over here. And I don't think we were clear on those expectations from the get-go and what that time was really intended to accomplish. So if you want to go that road, and it is valuable time when you're thinking scheduling, but you got to have the expectations clear and the purpose of that time really, really clear, and make sure everybody adheres to that.
Yeah. Next year is going to be a year of reflection and study for hopefully implementation the following year with something that we feel really strong and can be supported.
And it needs to be like structured. It can't be an unstructured time where you just expect people to figure out how to navigate that time. It needs to be very, very structured. So that's, again, a little bit of our fault on that one.
Yeah, thank you so much for your honesty around that. And I specifically asked that question because I know advisory is tough. And I would suggest perhaps looking at what Expeditionary Learning is doing around that, because they really have spent a lot of time on having a very structured advisory.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I know that you're pressed against time, but I do think that there's one other thing that I've learned of Northern Cass that other people could benefit from. Can you speak to your social emotional supports that you as a system provide to your community and your learners?
Yeah, so we've done I think this is an area of strength. We've written multiple grants. We do tons of training around vulnerability with Brene Brown and something called the Bounce Back Project, which is out of Buffalo, Minnesota. And if you don't know about it, find out about it. It's golden. That is some of the best and the easiest stuff to do with learners and adults. Our Nurtured Heart approach, we have multiple certified trainers that train parents, train kids, and train educators. We have a mental health therapist on site 2 days a week, and we're working to ramp that up over the next few years to serve our community and our adults as well. Our elementary and secondary counselor have worked on circle training, and that circle training, they've trained a group of learners in a social emotional learning class who then go out and train educators, and they train our younger kids, and they actually lead circles throughout the building. Probably one of the most powerful things I've ever seen happen in this building. And then I think the last part is we have a lot of educators and many at this table who commit every day to doing simple strategies. You know, Sam will start off with gratitude share. Everybody shares something they're grateful for, because you can do that in 40 seconds and it has such an impact long-term. So we've done a lot of those things. We've also taken the ability of college, career, and life readiness, and we've hired a person separate just to focus on that. So our counselors can focus on the things they're supposed to focus on, and not things that are just thrown on them. So you got to make sure your counselors are able to do the job they're supposed to do and not jobs people don't want to do.
All right, well, it looks like we are at time. Thank you so much, Northern Cast team. I feel like I've gotten a semester's worth of content and personalized learning in an hour, so thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and describing your challenges and being pioneers in this work. And there's a teacher in the video who's commenting on like your sense of team and your sense of like, I will work so hard because I care about our vision, and I can just see that so clearly in this conversation and how you work together. So yeah, thanks everyone for coming. And remember, we have 2 more days of breakout sessions next week and our closing plenary.
Thank you, Carly. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.